All right, let's move on to the Urbana City Council meeting. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Here.
Mr. Bowersox?
Here.
Ms. Chenoweth? Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe? Ms. Stevenson?
Present.
Mayor Pressing.
Here. First, we'll move on to ordinance number 2007-11-125, an ordinance approving a redevelopment agreement with TC Met Urbana. And we have Tom Carino, our Economic Development Director, to explain this.
Yes, good evening. You have before you a supplemental memo discussing some of the changes that were requested at a previous Committee of the Whole meeting related to the redevelopment agreement with Trammell Crow. The changes were primarily related to the retail component of the building. They do define the project as including approximately 9,000 square feet of retail. It also includes a provision related to ensuring that there is a retail component, and that if Trammell Crow were to lease that space to any other user other than a retail user, they would have to come to City Council for approval. Now, I did in the memo include the fact that Trammell Crow, at the time of the packet, had not had time to review the language, and they have now reviewed the language and actually didn't have an opportunity to get us comments until following the holiday, which was today. Now that we've had time to discuss, the representatives of Trammell Crow have some suggestions for wording changes in the redevelopment agreement. Now, the options would be for us to try to come up with language based on Trammell Crow's recommendations, or to possibly take a week to work out the language and then come back to council on December 3rd.
Yes.
If it's not of a complex nature, is it something that we could put together and move forward tonight?
I would think
And if not, why not?
I think it's probably better to take a week, don't you think? It's not going to hurt.
Well, just to give you a brief description of their requested changes, rather than have to come back to council for approval to lease to a tenant other than a retail tenant, Trammell Crow has asked that we build in some time frame. For example, they've requested 6 months. There's been some discussion that we go to a year, but basically that after that time frame, they would be allowed to rent to any user without having to come back to council at that point. That's what they would like to see in the agreement, rather than having to come back to council for approval later on in the process.
Dennis?
Well, I don't see any specific wording here, so it's kind of hard to make a judgment or a vote on something that I haven't read yet. So I'd suggest we defer it until next council meeting.
And I don't think there is any wording written yet. That's why you don't have anything in front of you.
Okay.
We just started the discussions today. There have been some emails, but certainly nothing finalized at this point yet.
I mean, I think we're willing to discuss it, but it's important to be able to see what you're approving.
Brandon Bowersox.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly support the concept. I think this change still gets at what we all wanted, which was to know that the developer would be putting in an adequate amount of effort into getting retail leased for the space. So I support the concept. After thinking about it a few minutes, because you had mentioned this to me, Tom, before the meeting, I think it would be good just to see the language next week, just so we aren't crafting something on the floor, because it is a little bit complex, and so that our attorney, who isn't here this evening, presently, the attorney who does the agreement, Ken Betts, could have a chance to just know that the language is all right, and so that Trammell Crow as well could know that they've seen it in writing and that we all approve the correct version of the ordinance. So I'm okay approving it next week and support it in concept definitely tonight.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I move that we that we send this to the council meeting a week from today.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Oh, those opposed, sorry. Then the motion carries. Okay, next, ordinance number 2007-11-132, an ordinance approving a major variance to allow an 11-foot, 11-inch encroachment into the required 22-foot rear yard. And this is for Trammell Crow. Robert Myers is here, our planner.
Good evening. This is actually a related case to the one you just heard. This is a request for a major variance, a request by Trammell Crow Higher Education Development to allow a rear yard setback, rear yard encroachment of 11 feet, 11 inches into the required 22-foot rear yard setback. That also includes an encroachment of a terrace by 3 feet, a terrace overhang. The property is located at 1008, 1010, and 1012 West University Avenue. The property is zoned B3, General Business District. This is next door, just east of the Hot Walk property. Because the property, it's zoned B3, General Business District, but because the property includes residential, it has to have additional setbacks, side and rear yard setbacks. Previously, there was a side yard setback variance granted, again for the side yards. Now they're requesting a variance for the rear yard that was unanticipated because the property boundaries are not as expected, in that a very narrow strip of land along the back, along the railroad, between this property and the railroad, they could not gain title to this property as anticipated. And the property, the project had already been designed when this when it was determined that they could not get title to this narrow strip as anticipated. But the petitioners believe that it's unnecessary for several reasons, and it actually would be a hardship to redesign the project to meet all of the zoning ordinance requirements. Because, as you know, infill development is difficult enough as it is. This is a L-shaped lot that has much higher setback requirements because it includes a residential. You have in your packet a cross-section of a proposed cross-section for the rear yard. If you all could refer to this, it's important because actually the lowest level, the parking garage, would extend as close as 1 foot to the rear property line, but the residential levels above would actually be 10 feet from the rear property line. So in other words, the building steps back from the rear property line. Another thing to note is that the narrow strip behind this property essentially serves as a rear yard setback because realistically it's never going to be developed. It's about 25 feet wide and 500 feet long. And again, it's squeezed between the railroad track and this property. And there, realistically, it's not going to be developed back behind there. And if the property should ever be deeded to anyone, most likely it would be deeded to the joining property owners. In other words, the railroad and this, the Trammell Crow property. Yes, to the best of our knowledge, it's owned by the railroad, yes. With that, in your staff memo, the variance criteria are reviewed on pages 4 and 5. Real quickly, a couple of factors that should be considered is, one, this is an irregular L-shaped property, which combined with a required 22-foot rear yard setback presents a serious practical difficulty for development. The variance will not serve as a special privilege because, again, the irregular shape of the lot poses unusual challenges to full development. And also the narrow strip of railroad right-of-way to the north essentially functions as a rear yard setback. The variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Well, the corridor is already zoned B3, General Business District, where actually 10-foot rear yard setbacks are the norm. So the rear yard setback for the residential portion will actually be the norm in terms of the district, so it won't alter the essential character. It's not going to cause a nuisance to the adjacent property because it's a narrow strip of land next to a railroad right-of-way, and so it will not cause a nuisance to that railroad or that narrow strip of land. So with that, the Zoning Board of Appeals voted unanimously, 6-0, to forward this case to the City Council with a recommendation for approval, and City staff likewise recommends approval.
Mr. Smythe?
A quick question for our attorney. Can we approve this without having approved the redevelopment agreement, or the development agreement, the previous ordinance? Do you see any problem passing this without having passed the development agreement?
No, I don't see any problem with that at all.
Thank you. In that case, I move that we approve.
Second?
Okay, motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Ms. Barnes. Any further discussion? Mr. Roberts?
I think that basically this is a really nice project. I think the fact that the residential part of the building is set back basically in alignment with other setback requirements for residential and construction in that area on that side is appropriate. And I also was thinking that there's another building that we've recently seen constructed on West Nevada, right next to Paradiso Cafe, that has this kind of unusual parking structure component in which you actually have the parking coming right up against, almost touching the property line, and then the building itself rises above it, set back at a more appropriate level. So I think we feel comfortable with this, at least I do.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes?
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Motion carries. Next is a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement regarding the water rate increase intervention.
If you all will recall, I'm sorry, Madam Chairman, may I be
Mr.
heard?
O'Neill.
Thank you. If you all recall, I brought this to you in committee. As you all, I'm sure, are keenly aware, Illinois American Water has filed a rate case with the Illinois Commerce Commission seeking, I believe it's a 60% rate increase. Obviously, that is of some grave concern to a number of communities, Urbana-Champaign included, and the intention here is that we join in intervening in that ICC case with Champaign, Savoy. I believe Sydney has also joined in this intervention. At this time, the county, at committee level, has not approved it, but it's not a fait accompli with the county. Just needs your approval for us to go ahead and intervene. There's also a budget amendment to pick up our share of the tab to have Clark Dietz, our consultant in this matter, so that we can pay them.
Smythe.
I move resolution number 2007-11-026R, resolution approving intergovernmental agreement regarding water rate increase intervention.
I second that.
Okay, motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Mr. Roberts. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carries. Next is the ordinance to pay for this. Ordinance number 2007-11-131. Mr. O'Neill.
I want to make sure that you all have the correct number in your packet. That packet should, the ordinance before you should be $17,000, not $15,000. Is that what everyone has? Okay. Then-
Now we do.
All right. So I want to make sure you know what you're voting on. It would be for $17,000, not $15,000. And
It could change if we have more participants, but we thought we would make sure we cover it rather than coming back.
Absolutely. as more communities join in the intervention in this intergovernmental agreement, our pro rata share will drop. But rather than having to come back and incrementally ask for $1,000 more or less, we thought this would be an amount that would be good to start with.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Roberts.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2007-11-131, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance concerning intervention in the water company rate increase.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, seconded by Mr. Smythe. Any discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes?
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson? Mayor Pressing?
Yes. Motion carries. Finally, we have resolution number 2007-11-028R, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement for regional emergency coordination. Ron O'Neill.
Again, this was at committee. It's pretty self-explanatory. It allows the management of Champaign, Urbana, and I believe the University of Illinois, something that's been kicked around for about a year and a half. It's finally coming to fruition. Champaign has passed it, and it just allows that our upper management would be able to coordinate their efforts, policies, and procedures in the event of a security or natural disaster.
Ms. Barnes.
I'd like to move resolution number 2007-11-028R.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Barnes, seconded by Mr. Smythe. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. There being no further business, this meeting of the, special meeting of the Urbana City Council is adjourned.